gonna turn my video off while I talk so it's not so distracting. But hi, so I'm here to talk about LegCon, which is the legislative convention that the National PTA puts on. I make this work. So I'm going to talk to you about who I am. I'm Danny Indovino-Colley. I'm the federal legislative chair for the Minnesota PTA. So I do this kind of federal advocacy work. I live in Bloomington, Minnesota. I've got a daughter in kindergarten and a son in pre-K. And the PTA that I'm a member of is Hillcrest Community School, which is my daughter's kindergarten PTA. I'm actually the chair of my son's PTO, which is we're a separate nonprofit, and it's the Bloomington Family Advisory. It's a Bloomington Early Learning Family Advisory Council. Because it's a different thing. It's an ECFE advisory. It's not PTA, but I'm the chair of that. And then I'm on the Hillcrest Community School PTA. Some little things about me. I do a lot of advocacy work, generally around education and disability, both in the federal realm and in the state realm. Along with last year, I helped pass a piece of legislation at the Minnesota State that is a requirement for teachers, well, not a requirement, it's highly encouraged for teachers who are going through the licensure process or renewing their license to get a 1-hour anti-ableism training taught by a person with a disability. So that is my latest legislative win when it comes to education. And this year I'm working on a private insurance coverage for alternative communication devices or AACs, and then also an expansion of special education support for public school child care programs to pre-K. So that's kind of my whole thing. And then other than that, I do cross stitch and I have 3 cats. That's me. So I'm going to talk about LegCon. This year's theme is Raise Our Voice for Every Child. It's virtual this year, so every other year, LegCon is either held on the Hill, so actually in DC, or virtually online. This is a virtual year, so it's extremely accessible for you, for other members in your PTA or other people in your community. And it's when members from all over the country learn from each other and they bring our message to their federal elected representatives right from your house. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how LegCon works, and then some tips and tricks for how to talk to legislators, because the point of this whole thing is not that you have a lot of advocacy experience. That's my job to help get you prepared and get it coordinated. It's that you can bring actual authentic stories to lawmakers when normally they're just talking to a lot of lobbyists and people like me. So not people like you, though I'm also like you. So at LegCon, you'll network with fellow PTA advocates. There's time to network with people from other states to hear what they're advocating for, to hear what their concerns are, and which part of the priorities really resonate with them. You also will get an update on the emerging education and school safety policy issues for children and families. The federal law right now, or the federal government, is moving very quickly, and so the National PTA provides all sorts of updates and press releases and things like that to make sure that we're all up to date with what our policy priorities are and how to keep advocating for them in the current landscape. Which is just a fancy way to say, they'll help you respond to the things that are in the news about education policy. You'll also hear from congressional advocacy champions and national advocacy partners. So there's awards where you hear about what other PTAs are doing that's really outstanding. You'll also hear from different kinds of organizations that are doing this work, whether they're putting on workshops or talking keynotes. Last year, Jill Biden addressed the body. They usually find somebody pretty high up in the government to address the body. So it's kind of a fun way to hear what other people are working on and their priorities as well. And then you'll learn how to make an impact on federal policy decisions. So you'll learn how to have those conversations with your lawmakers, what can really impact them and help them champion the policies that you're there to talk about. And then you get to speak to your members of Congress about those issues that are important to you and your community. So after all of this kind of thinking and working that is really fun and exciting, you then get to have these great conversations with lawmakers or their staff about the exciting things that we're doing. So these are just the logistical details. It's March 6th, 4th to 6th. It's all virtually, so it's all going to be online on your computer, and all sessions will be visible within 90 days. So if you can't view all of the different sessions in real time and live, you can then watch them later. If you wanted to, the cost is $50, but there are scholarships available from the Minnesota PTA, and you'll have access to this link to apply for one. So there's up to 10 for people who want to apply to get them for LegCon. The registration deadline is February 15th, so it's a little over 10 days away. And there'll be a pre-LegCon training on February 25th, which if you can't make, I can help catch you up on those things, or there probably will be a recording, but it'd be awesome if you could attend that too. And just one thing that's on here, but I want to reiterate for people, is you do not need any experience with having done these things before. You do not need to be an expert on policy or have ever spoken to a lawmaker. You don't even have to have ever read a bill before to do this. The point of this is to bring real, authentic, personal stories from our communities to the people making decisions that impact them. And you are an expert in that, whether or not you've ever advocated in this way before. So why attend? And I've said some of those things, I'll keep repeating them. So lawmakers listen hardest to their constituents. So if you live in their district and are impacted by the things that are happening in your district, they want to hear from you because you're the people that are going to vote for them. You're the people that are going to support them. So they are very interested in what their constituents have to say and how their constituents feel about different things that they'll have to make decisions about. So that means the more people from different areas around the state that attend LegCon mean the more legislators and their staff that will hear our policy priorities. So, there's 8 congressional districts in the state of Minnesota, which means there are 8 congresspeople that we could potentially have meetings with, along with our 2 senators. Depending on where you live, depends on who your congressional representative is. So if you're in Minneapolis, or like in the first ring suburbs around Minneapolis, you would be in Congressional District 5. That's Ilhan Omar's district. If you were in the same kind of area of St. Paul, you're probably in Congressional District 4. That's Betty McCollum. But then if you live like Chanhassen or west for a bit, that would be Congressional District 6. So then you're looking at Tom Emmer. South of the river is CD2, and that's Angie Craig. And south of that is Congressional District 1. And I've completely forgotten who the representative is down there in my brain. But I could tell you that. Anyway, those are, Pete Stauber is up in 8, which is kind of the Arrowhead. And then Fishbach is in 7, which is like what we would think of Western rural Minnesota. So those are the congressional districts, and we want people to visit with all of those different all those different representatives, because then those are more people and more votes that would hear our priorities. I'm actually going to look up who the rep is in CD1 really quick. Brad Finstad. I've met with him too. Anyway, so and just for those things, like, no one can tell the story of your community better than you. I keep saying that. It's just true. More than anything that there is. Thank you, Brandon. It is Brad Finstad. And then the National PTA provides stellar programming to up your advocacy game, to teach you more about what other PTAs and organizations are doing, and to help you feel connected to parents all over the country, and to feel like you're part of a fight together. It feels really good to be advocating for the same thing as people in all 50 states and to have those conversations. You really get that feel when you're at the Hill on Hill Day, and this virtual convention is doing that same thing. That's why you have kind of those workshops and those larger meetings going in and out, so you can see the real impact of what you're having. So at the same time, on the same day, somebody in Hawaii is having the same conversation as you. Somebody in New York is having the same conversation as you. somebody in Kansas is having the same conversation as you. And that's really powerful that all our lawmakers are hearing the same thing at the same time. And the more people that we have from the more congressional districts, the more of those conversations are happening. So what will LegCon look like? This is the schedule. On Tuesday, you've got two workshop blocks. The workshops are really, really great. Usually there's kind of nonprofits that will present about the work that they're doing. Last year I went to one that talked about ways to communicate in non-toxic manners, even when you're talking to people that don't agree with you. So like how to have civil discourse about difficult topics. And then another one I went to was about adverse childhood experiences, or how trauma in childhood can impact learning and behavior in schools, and then what legislation is we were advocating for to help those kids. I don't know what this year's are going to look like, but they're usually really great. Those workshops tend to be smaller and they have more time for interaction. Then at 3:30, there's advocacy awards. That's where you hear about the states that are doing the really big work. And it's very inspiring. And then at 5 o'clock, this is kind of the most important thing of the first day. We'll do a state delegation planning meeting. I'll basically run that meeting. We'll talk about all of the people we have meeting who the next day, what we think that we should focus on of the policy priorities, and also to answer any questions or concerns that people in our delegation will have. Then on Wednesday, there'll be a Hill Day kickoff meeting in the morning, but then between 9 and 5 will be all of our meetings. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but they'll be scheduled by a third party that will help us, and you will get information on when your meetings are, and then you will attend those throughout the day. So if you only have 3 meetings and they're 20 minutes each, you wouldn't have to, you would know what they are ahead of time, and so you could still do other things throughout the day other than those meetings, or you could always attend as an observer or a helper for somebody's meetings if they are alone. Or maybe some districts that we don't have somebody from there, we might set up meetings and have people go otherwise. So there's opportunities to be either more involved on that day or not. Then there's the Hill Day celebration at the end, where we kind of talk about the things we heard that day and celebrate that we had those hard conversations. And then on Thursday, there's 2 more workshop blocks. And so preparing for Hill Day, Amy and I, so the president and I will be working with Advocacy Associates, which is a consulting firm hired by the National PTA to get those meetings scheduled. This is new this year. Hopefully it's going to be really slick and awesome, but just know that this is the first time we've done it. So bear with us if it isn't perfect right at the start. But then that means that I don't have to be individually coordinating every meeting, or you don't have to be individually coordinating every meeting, which should make things go a lot smoother. And then at that February 25th planning meeting, you'll receive information on how to access your meeting times, and then a whole bunch of materials they're going to put together for us. If you can't make that meeting, I can help work through that with you. But those materials are going to be really, really beneficial. We haven't had a lot of them in the past. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but it means that we don't have to do that research individually, which should make it feel more complete and us more prepared. So those provided materials, you'll get a personalized meeting schedule. So you'll get all your meeting links for that day. Your congressional representative that you hopefully will get a meeting with, and then the Senate staff, so the senators. You should get a member profile of each person you're going to talk to. So where they're from and some things about them. This will be really, really beneficial. Like, I spoke to Pete Stauber's office last year, and I did not know that he had a son with Down syndrome, and therefore was extremely supportive of special education funding ahead of time. And so it would have made a better pitch if I had known that. And so that's what these member profiles are helping do. So you don't need to do a deep dive on every single person in Congress. And then also it'll talk about legislation that they have sponsored or signed on to, and then any suggested talking points for that. So it could be that they sponsored a previous version of a bill and it's going to be reintroduced, and you want to ask them to make sure they sign on to it. Just kind of like the materials that you will get will explain exactly what that ask is and what you should talk about. But it does mean that you could have some real direct impact on what happens in Congress. So it's not just saying these are things we support, but it might be saying this is a bill we'd like you to sponsor or to show publicly you support. And that's a really powerful thing that we'll get direction around being able to do, so we can feel really confident in those asks. So I'm gonna go over some things. Actually, does anybody have any questions about like the bones of LegCon before I talk about the policy and how to meet with a lawmaker? Cool. So now I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks. Oh, wait, I see something in the chat. Okay, none here. Awesome. Thank you so much. Some tips and tricks about meeting with your lawmaker, and some things to help you feel a little bit more confident. So you'll usually be granted between 15 and 30 minutes. Be prepared to talk for about 10 of those minutes and give 5 minutes for questions. Your meeting might start late and then you don't get extra time. Your meeting might run longer if that staffer doesn't have anything after and they have a lot of questions. But just know that you didn't do anything wrong if you're in and out in 15 minutes. They're just meeting with a ton of people all of the time. They call this fly-in season, which means that there's a lot of different organizations that'll be meeting with our representatives all the time during February and March. And then like into April. So it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's not that they don't like you. It's that you kind of have those short amount of times to deliver information, and then you get, you're that's it. And don't be worried about that. Really, you're not going to cover every single policy priority. That's by design. You'll have some handouts you can email them. They can go over it all. Either focus on the asks that are in your material or focus on something you have a really strong story about. Both of my children are in special education. Special education is a huge impact in my life. Last year, when I was having those conversations with lawmakers, I began with that and had the most stories around that, and the deeper conversations around that, just because it was a part of my life and I could be more authentic there. So don't worry that you're going to have to give a policy presentation of 15 bills in 10 minutes. You're not. Like I've said before, those personal stories are where you want to focus. So more than likely you'll be meeting with a staff member from your representative or senator's office and not the member themselves. Last year, I had 10 meetings and we only got one meeting with a representative of those 10. It might be easier because we're doing now constituents meeting with members, and so therefore they might be more likely to make time for you because you're their constituents. But just know that that staff is highly specialized. They'll be knowledgeable and interested in what you have to say. It's not like you're just kind of being pawned off on someone that doesn't know. And very often they advise that lawmaker on what to pay attention to. So they might be writing briefs or giving a daily summary of all the meetings they had. And so they will bring what you've said and your policy information that you provide to your member. And often they'll like jot down about your story, and then maybe your lawmaker will reach back out or maybe not. But that can be talking to staff is also really powerful and how a lot of the work gets done. For instance, last year I went with Heather Starks and she told a story to, I believe it was Amy Klobuchar's staffer, about how someone in her family utilized a veterans healthcare program that was really, really impactful to their life. And that staff member brought it back to Senator Klobuchar, and they ended up doing an event in district. So here in Minnesota around that, and her husband and her mother-in-law got to talk about how that policy impacted their lives. And it helped Senator Klobuchar get more support for that program, and report about that program to her constituents. So those things could happen too. The staff is always on the lookout for really impactful stories that they can tell to help support our priorities and their priorities. For that meeting, so just be respectful to them. They'll be respectful to you. Though you may know they're not in agreement with what you've come to speak with them about, you're their constituent, they'll want to hear what's important to you. Your political party might not line up with the political party of the member you're meeting with. They'll still listen to you, and you can still have really deep conversations with them. Try to leave any preconceived notions you have at the door and have conversations with that staff person to person. You know, it can be a really powerful conversation, and they could ask questions you didn't expect and be curious about things that that then can impact their opinions no matter what they are. So I met with every single member of the delegation last year because I went to DC just with Heather. It's really hard for people to travel to DC. We get that. This is why virtual LegCon is such a huge opportunity for the members in our state. But I spoke to every single member of our delegation, and they did have different opinions and different questions, but everyone treated me fantastically. And everyone was interested and engaged. So it's awesome. Don't worry if that's something. I think people worry about that sometimes, which is why I put it in here. Don't worry about it. They're really excited to hear from you because you're the PTA, and who doesn't love the PTA? And then you can listen to what they have to say and answer any questions they have. Don't assume that they're not persuadable or won't agree with you based on something you read in the news. You might tell them a story that really changes their heart. And then obviously, if you're ever uncomfortable, it's in your rights to end the meeting and to contact me or the National PTA or the member themselves if it was their staff. I've never heard of that happening. I just want people to feel supported. If that were to happen to you, there are ways that you can talk about it. But like I said, I've never heard of it before. The notes that you get before that meeting that we talked about earlier, they might include information about bills. I talked about that a little bit. It might ask you to request that they sponsor or introduce a bill. And if you ever have any questions about those materials, because you're getting them a couple of weeks ahead of time, how the process works, you've been asked to discuss, you can reach out to me. I have a lot of practice and can reach out to the National PTA's advocacy staff if we need more information from them as well. And then it's okay to say you don't know. Don't try to come up with an answer if you don't know the answer. If you don't memorize everything on a policy brief, me too. It's impossible to memorize them all. So it's totally fine to say that you will follow up with them. You should be following up to write a thank you note anyway. And in that, you can answer any questions they had or attach any supplemental materials. And then a lot of those answers are in the briefs you provide. So later you can kind of pull that out, or you can follow up with me or the National PTA advocacy staff on your own. But I'm more than welcome, like more than happy to take any questions you have back to the National PTA to help get those answers. And they have had every single question and help formulate answers to put in your thank you note. So don't worry about not knowing something. Staff's used to that. People are advocating all the time for policies that they believe in, but they don't necessarily know all the nitty gritty about the law because we're not lawmakers, we're your parents. And that's what makes us important to this process. And like I said, they want to hear from you. Bring those policy briefs, provide those links in an email with them later. But you want to focus your time on those personal connections or stories that make the priorities stick in their head. And often they'll be able to relate them to their real life. You'll tell them a story. They'll say, yeah, my son, my daughter, my nephew, my best friend, something like that. And they can relate to you and you can have that deeper conversation. And that's why you're there. Okay, so let's talk about the policy agenda. So we're going to look at this really kind of from a broad overview. There are some really in-depth policy briefs of each of the kind of bullet points that we're going to look at that you can read through and find on the website. I have a link in this presentation, which I'm pretty sure that you will get sent. And so you can read through all those if you want to or don't. The PTA does an amazing job of putting them together. I'm not going to walk you through every brief in 30 minutes. Your head would spin and you would be very confused. So we're going to hit the big rocks, which I think is the most important part to kind of know. So they broke up into three areas. It's like, so this is the first one, advocating for our students. The PTA's mission is to promote those safety and well-being of all children and youth. And so we understand that children cannot learn without safe and supportive schools, homes, and communities. So like I was talking earlier about the adverse childhood experiences workshop I went to last year, trying to help prevent those for children makes them more ready to learn, keeps their brain from being impacted by trauma. And so the policies that we're calling on Congress and the administration to talk about and to fund are increasing access to behavioral and mental health supports and services. People have already had that trauma so that they can, those children can, get help and more meaningfully participate in their school family. Strengthening school safety and promoting safe and secure storage in the home. So talking about guns in schools and safe storage in houses and having hard conversations with other parents, and how we can support policy around those things. Then promoting a positive and safe online experience. So how technology is used in schools, how we talk to parents about technology, and what safeguards we can put in place as a nation around those things, around bullying, around, inappropriate contact from adults, all sorts of things. And then ensuring an equitable educational experience for all students, including LGBTQ plus students. And so some policies around those things. And there's a brief about all 4 of these bullet points that you can get more depth into information on. And these are the big policy objectives for advocating our students that the National PTA has. Like I said earlier, if one of these things resonates much more strongly with you, you can talk about that one and then just say the other ones are in the briefs you're going to share. You don't need to hit every single one, but I wanted to share them. Let's talk about the next one, which is advocating for our families. And so this is just to empower those families and communities to advocate for their children. So not only are we advocating for children, we're also helping families advocate for children. And supporting that role that families play in fostering student success and building what we call the school family, or what I call the school family, which is the people in the school, people in the community, and the people in our children's families. And so we're looking at centering the perspectives, needs of families with promoting meaningful and inclusive family engagement and communication, family engagement centers. We have those in Minnesota. It's really cool. So you're kind of in a position here to talk about something that we have that the PTA wants to support for the whole state, for the whole country. And then those evidence-based comprehensive substance use education, prevention, and early intervention programs. So helping students navigate those things as well as helping their families navigate them. We're looking at food insecurity and increasing access to healthy foods for all families. Another place that we in Minnesota have kind of a advantage about, because we have a statewide food program here that is not nationwide. So this could also be a really good place to talk about where your family has been impacted by that. It's been a positive impact and how that has looked for you. That's a really great place to tell the personal story, is around that food insecurity. And then ensuring the welcoming school environment for all families, including immigrant families, LGBTQ students. So this also might be a place that your family has a story around, or someone in your community has a story around, that you want to connect with the lawmaker and connect with the policy about. And these are kind of those things that we're talking about for how we advocate and show up for our families and the policy we support. And then this is advocating for our schools. So the PTA has worked to ensure those schools have the resources they need to help children learn, grow, and succeed. We all know this is a large part of what we do in individual PTAs, that we're fundraising, that we're working with staff and teachers to help meet the needs of schools who often just don't have the resources they need for that. And we've stepped in there. And because of that, we understand the long-term success of our nation depends on the quality of those investments in our education system. That we're hoping that our government and our society value those schools so that they can have those supports that they need to provide the best education for our students. Fully funding the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. This is something I talk with my legislators a lot about, both here in the state of Minnesota with our state funding for special ed, and then nationally funding for special ed. Like I said, this is a really natural place to connect with lawmakers. For instance, both Congressman Sauber and Congresswoman Craig support this or sponsor this bill because they both have children that use special education services, and they know how important it is for their family and their community. So that's a really strong place where they've fostered a connection with each other and they're friends with each other. And both they and their staff talked about that when I was in DC last year. And so while, the news or the zeitgeist would say like, oh, one of them's Republican and one of them's a Democrat, they could never be friends. But actually, this is a place where they've deeply connected, and it's a place where you can deeply connect if this is something that impacts your family. I'm just telling the story because it impacts mine, but really any policy objective, you can have a similar experience with your lawmakers and yourself. And then you can all say, yeah, let's work together to make this better for all of our for everyone in the country. But it's just really easy to have conversations when you're talking about the people around you, because you just feel it deeper and they feel that you feel it deeper. So this is one that I talk about extensively. Sometimes half of my 10-minute meeting, I'll talk about special education funding. Specifically too, because in my district, if we had the full promised special education funding, we wouldn't have been cutting $4 million out of our budget this year. We would have a surplus. So also, helping our lawmakers understand that having the promised funding, because the original laws around inclusive education and students with disabilities promise a funding level that has never been reached in this country. And if we had that, our schools would be in much better shape financially. On that same vein is safeguarding the funding for those key programs. So Title I, Title IX, family engagement centers, things like that. And I'm just like listing off jargon right now, but the brief goes really more deep into it. Also, you or someone in your PTA or somewhere else in the state might engage really closely with one of these programs. And then that's a really good place to connect as well, especially if you can say, you voted for this to happen, this amount of money came into our community, this is how it impacted us. But just know that if you don't know what all of these words and letters mean, there is more information on that if it's something you would want to focus on in those meetings. And then protecting public schools and opposing the redirection of funding towards vouchers. So there's been a lot of talk about vouchers in the news this week. There was an executive order about vouchers. The PTA put out a statement on that, as well as they have a position about keeping public funds in public schools that does include charter schools, but not private school vouchers. And so that might be something that they ask us to focus on if it's still top of mind in March. So just kind of put a pin in that and know that that is a position that the National PTA has, and we might be asked to kind of elevate during these conversations. And then the last one there is strengthening that teacher workforce and the education pipeline to help get more people into teaching, sustainable careers in teaching, and keeping our best teachers in the classrooms. So these are the resources I have for you. I left about 20 minutes for questions. There's not a ton of people, so we might not go the full 20 minutes, but if you have any questions for me about how LegCon works, how the scholarship program works, how you talk to legislators, or the policy, please ask me. That's why I'm here. And I'll turn my video back on. Joanne, you're new, but for some reason my video was weird and flickering, so I had it turned off, but I'll turn it on so you can see that I'm a person with a face. I learned a facilitation training to give it like a full 20 seconds, so I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable with my weight, but yeah, these are all of the resources you'll have access to. So registration for LegCon, please do that before February 15th if you'd like to come and tell all of your friends and the members in your PTA to do it as well. You can have those meetings as a group or individually. I forgot to mention that. And so that could be a really fun way to get together and have these important conversations. Then there's the scholarship information, which is the application. And then the information schedule FAQ that I went over is at that link under there. Then they have resources. So their policy asks aren't on the website yet. They will be. And so that will be where they'll be housed when they arrive. And then the policy priorities for the 119th Congress, which is the Congress we're in now, that lasts these 2 years, are on the link that I put there on the basic website, and those will be there for these full 2 years, and you can use them whenever you need them outside of LegCon as well. So yeah, I don't think that you all need the training on the 25th if you gather as a group, because then really that's going to help walk through like the packet and how that's going to work. And as long as one person knows and can brief the rest of you, I think you'll be okay. So having somebody do that can be really helpful. And then I just asked if you do it as a group, just everyone register on their own, just so they know who's coming. And then also, just to help reimburse for the cost that the National PTA spends doing all this for us. Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me talk at you for 40 minutes. I really appreciate it. I hope that you come to LegCon, that we can work more and talk more about this in the coming weeks, and that we can get the ear of our lawmakers to help create impact throughout the country. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.